No, thank you so much for joining me, Gavin. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to talk about your book today.
Oh, it is a delight to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thank you. So, quick introduction and we'll get straight into it. So, Gavin Oates is someone who just simply wants to inspire the world, help others to help themselves, and always put the best show on possible. He also happens to be an award winning entrepreneur, award winning comedian, and a best selling author. He lives in Edinburgh, Scotland, with his wife, two children, and his cat, David Bowie, which I happen to love. I was like, that's just brilliant. We'll be discussing his book, Life Will See You Now from 2020. However, his most recent book is A Head Full of Everything. So, with that being said, I have to ask, would you say this book is an autobiography in some shape or form?
Yes.
Hmm.
So it wasn't meant to be. So I wrote Life Will See You Now. So it came out 2020, as you just mentioned, and I wrote it towards the end of 2018. And in 2018, I had an almighty, let's call it breakdown. My brain broke, and there was a review of that book came out that summed it up perfectly, and it said, "This is not self-help. This is Gav help. He's written the damn thing for himself." And then they gave me 5 stars, and I thought, and it was only then I was like, oh my goodness, they're absolutely right. I literally wrote the book that I needed for myself. And when I go back and look at it now, I realize just how autobiographical it is. I mean, I'm not a celebrity. I didn't win a gold medal at any Olympics. I didn't win The Apprentice. However, I definitely do go back to my childhood. I tell a story, and it just took me on this incredible journey. And of course, it came out 5-6 weeks before the pandemic.
Oh, geez.
I mean, who would have known? And all of a sudden, it just seemed to be the book that was needed for those times for so many people all over the world. And when people start getting in touch during lockdown, saying that it's my book that saved their life or kept them engaged or helped them to keep a smile on their face, just unbelievable. So yeah, very autobiographical. I think that's the word. And then the other one that you mentioned there, the teen book that I've got out currently. Again, it's kind of the teen version of Life Will See You Now. So, yeah, there's a bit of, no, there's a lot of me in there as well.
Yeah, but your experiences are so fun. Like, I'm like, how many people get to go up and do like stand up at Edinburgh and things like that, or just generally, like, it's such a nerve-wracking thing to do. I was just like, oh my God, I could never do that. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, it is. It is absolutely crazy. And I remember, I mean, when I started doing stand up, there was no YouTube or Twitter or anything like that that you could kind of launch yourself on and be posting nice little sketches or 30-second snippets of a routine from a comedy club. It was old school, get out with flyers, shove them in people's faces, try and convince them to come to your show, take out an ad in a magazine or a newspaper,
Wow.
and fight to get on radio shows and just be heard and be seen. And it was bonkers. We were 17 and 18. I'm saying I was one half of a double act to begin with. And, we decided, we'd heard that there was a festival in Melbourne in Australia. And we were like, let's go
Wow.
do that. And everyone's like, nobody knows who you are. And we were like, who cares? Let's just book a ticket and go and do the Melbourne Festival. So we did. And it was amazing.
That is such an experience. And, it just kind of, as I was reading your book, it does make you think, like, and I even asked my partner, I was like, like, what is it that you wanted to be when you were younger? And I was like, so why do you think we kind of give up on our dreams?
Do you know? So I think there are people whose dreams change, and I think it's important that more people out there know that's okay. Like, dreams change. We can have new dreams. We can scrap a dream and start again. And I think actually sometimes you have to. Sometimes it's really refreshing and really important. However, that being said, I think there's an awful lot of people who, we conform to society, I guess. I mean, when I went to school, I was a teenager in the 90s, and it was very much, you go to school, Gavin, you pass your exams, you go to university, you get a job, and guess what? You've made it. That's what it was, and it was sold to us as that was how to be successful.
Mm.
Nowadays, of course, certainly I do a lot of talks in schools in Scotland and things, and there's a wonderful phrase that they use, and that is no wrong path. And there's a whole initiative now in Scottish education around no wrong path. And I love it because it's this idea that you can go to uni, you can go to college, you can do an apprenticeship, you can do training, you can do volunteering, you can take a year out, you can go travel the world. None of it's wrong, and it's this idea of encouraging young people now to, you've got that crazy big dream, or even maybe a wee sensible dream, go give it a go and see if it doesn't work out. You'll be absolutely fine. But I think certainly for a lot of people, there's pressure from parents, there's pressure from, there's financial pressures, I mean, especially nowadays, and the cost of living and so on. But I think sometimes when people look at, if you truly want to go into stand-up, for example, you're not going to make any money. And if you do, it's going to take a long time. Some people might get there quicker. And I think some people look at it and think, well, do you know what? It'd be much easier just to go and get a proper job. Thing is, stand-up is a proper job. You work damn hard and you're away all the time. But I think the reality of life sometimes gets in the way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And sometimes I think, like when I speak to people, there's a sort of a fear, isn't it, of doing anything different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I certainly, I even now, I still worry about people's perceptions, and I think I worry less about that now. I mean, I'm about to turn 43, and I still worry a lot about things. I have huge run-ins with anxiety, but I think back to my teen self, desperate to fit in, desperate to belong, and weirdly, desperate to stand out and be different. And that's I can't speak for all teenagers, but I think there's a lot of teenagers find themselves in that weird space of, they want to be their own person, they want to stand out, they want to be different and be proud of that, but, I want to fit in with this crowd here and not be too different. And I think that's where it can either go right for some and it can go wrong for others. But yeah, huge amount of fear for a lot of us. That what if question, what if it goes wrong? What if I fail? What if no one likes it? What if I get terrible reviews? What if? And I think it's just that mindset of flipping that on its head and saying, yeah, but what if it goes well? What if you love it? What if people really enjoy it? What if it's the most exciting thing you've ever done in your life? And it's just flipping that way of asking that question, I think, and getting excited about the positive answers rather than the negative answers.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a really hard one, isn't it? And actually, like, you mentioned you went through lots of difficult moments in the book as well, and so I was just wondering, like, how do we keep pushing through when everything really feels very difficult?
I think it's genuinely one of the hardest questions to answer, because there's obviously there's not a one size fits all. And you're right, in the book I highlight a few different things. In fact, all the books I've ever done, they're very personal. And I talk about losing my dad, and I talk about failing, and I talk about things coming to an end and relationships breaking up and all this sort of stuff, and the dream coming to an end, and how awful that was when it all fell apart. And but like all good rock and roll stories, there's always a positive end. But I think the key is to push on through. Now I know the question is how do we push on through that? But I think the answer is to push on through, and it's to have that hope and that belief that things will get better. And the reality are, they usually do. They usually do. And I think it's really hard. I think it's really difficult, when things are not going your way and you're down and you're tired, anxious, depressed, or whatever it might be. And I've been there and done them all, occasionally still do. And it's just, you're almost kind of forcing yourself at times to get out your bed, have a big drink of water, and go outside and get some fresh air, and just keep trying to shift that mindset. But as we've now said a couple of times, that's really hard. It's exhausting. But I think it's really important when you are down or struggling or not feeling yourself, I think it's really important that you acknowledge that. I think it's really important that you kind of embrace it rather than fight against it. One of the things I've said a few times in books and interviews and things is you almost have to let those days in. Like, let them in, show them around, almost like doff one's cap to it, and just acknowledge it, but make sure you show it the door. Don't let it come and hang about for too long. Let it in. If you need to lie in your bed for a day, shove an ice cream in your face, do it, because sometimes that helps. But it's really, really important that we show that those moments the door as well, and let them go. But yeah, I think there's too much time spent fighting anxiety and things like that. Sometimes it's almost like that. I guess it's coming from that place of mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
where you acknowledge, this is how I'm feeling. This is just where I'm at right now, and that sort of embracing of those moments, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think there was like a Rumi quote that was something like, see it as as a visitor comes to your
Yeah,
house, and then
yeah.
just let it
It
go when it needs
it,
to.
it took me a long time to, I think, understand what that actually means.
Mm.
Because again, it's different for everyone. But the worst my anxiety has ever been was 2018, and I've lived with anxiety for it. We all do. I mean, we need anxiety to live, of
Mm.
course. And I think sometimes people forget anxiety is quite normal. It's
Mm.
just, unfortunately for some of us, sometimes it explodes. And
Yeah.
2018 for me was I mean, I had a little bit of it going on at the start of that first lockdown because I speak for a living, and when events disappeared, you're just like, oh, when you see 150 events leave your diary in 72 hours, it's pretty
Oof.
terrifying.
Ouch.
But 2018 was the last time where it really, really blew up for me, and I think I was 3 months before I was able to try and get it under control to some
Mm.
extent, and then start to rebuild. And it is exhausting,
Yeah.
exhausting. But there is always a way through. So important for people to talk to other people. That's the
Mm.
hardest bit. Saying to somebody, "I'm not okay. I need
Yeah.
help." But it's so important that people do it, and no one should ever be ashamed of not feeling well and asking for help. So important.
Yeah, actually, would you recommend that as a way to, if you keep going back and forth, especially with anxiety, is to just make sure you have like that kind of essentially a toolkit or support network, isn't it? So that you
Yeah,
don't feel like you're going backwards each time
yeah.
you.
You need to find your people, basically, and whether that's professional help, which absolutely should not be something to be ashamed of or embarrassed by. I mean, my wife is amazing. My wife Ali is just an absolute superstar, and we've been together since we were 18, and
Oh.
like, she can kick my ass when it's needed, and I mean that in a positive way.
Mm.
Just the right shove, the right amount of push that's needed. Um, and I'd say probably one of my friends that I can talk to about this stuff, and it's not the one you would expect. And I think, again, this is the thing. Quite often people go to their best pal.
Mm.
It's actually quite unlikely to be your best pal, I think, at times. You'll find your person in the strangest of places, but you want those people who are able to sit on the end of the phone in silence at 2 o'clock in the morning, just
Mm.
and just be there with you. So yeah, there's, again, you mentioned a toolkit. I mean, there's lots of tools that can go in that toolkit. So important that people go looking for the ones that work, though.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you mentioned about purpose, which obviously is always a good way to kind of pull yourself through. But what's like the best way of actually finding your purpose? Because sometimes it's like, is it this? Is it that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, do you know? I actually don't know how to answer that question. Again, it's that no size. There's not a one size fits all when it comes to purpose, but certainly, I think when it comes to, like, I know a lot of people right now. Like, a lot of the work I do, a lot of people speak to me after talks at events, and they're like, "I just don't know what my purpose is." And I'm saying, "What sets your soul on fire?"
Hmm.
And they'll be like, "Oh, not," and they'll it's usually like a conference or something that I'm speaking at, and that'll be to do with their job. And the answer is usually something like, "Not this." I'm like, "Well, why are you doing it? If this isn't the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning and sets your soul on fire and gives you a wonderful feeling on the
Hmm.
inside and puts a smile on your face, then why are you doing it?" But again, this is what we spoke about earlier. It's that conforming to society and doing what
Hmm.
you think you need to do, or doing what you think others want you to do. But certainly for me, I mean, from a young age, there was two things that really genuinely excited me in life, and that was stand-up comedy,
Hmm.
and teaching.
Oh.
So my mum was a PE teacher,
Oh.
um, and I actually originally set out to do primary school teaching. So when I left school, I was doing stand-up, but I was 17 and a half years old. So like I needed, it wasn't, people weren't giving me gigs every night. So I had to do something. So I actually went to uni and did a primary school teaching degree.
Huh.
So, but what I discovered by gigging at night and being a student teacher during the day, I was truly finding my purpose. I
Mm.
was discovering that you can get up in front of an audience, you can really make them laugh, but you can also make them feel amazing.
Mm.
And that was how I ended up essentially doing what I'm doing now. I took teaching and I took stand up, which are kind of the same thing,
Mm.
and put them together and created a business and wrote a bunch of books. And now, like tomorrow, for example, like I'm in London just now as I'm talking to you, and tomorrow I'm doing a 1 hour keynote at a big event for a big global brand. And my goal is to get up there and make them laugh hard, but
Mm.
I want them to feel wonderful at the
Mm.
end. I want to challenge their thinking. I want to teach them great stuff. And, that came from getting in a room with 28 8-year-olds every day and then going out into the clubs at night and performing. And, these things happen by putting myself out there and, pushing myself to get out of bed every day and go and try new things and put myself into scary experiences. And no matter how rubbish the stand-up gig went, get up the next day, write something new and go and try something different.
Mm.
And through just getting up and going and doing it and putting myself out there, I guess I found my purpose. But if anybody's listening to this that currently doesn't feel that they're doing something purposeful or that they don't have a purpose-led, um, if their current career, if you like, is not purpose-led or values-driven or whatever, you don't have to just quit what you're doing and go and do something else. But it doesn't mean you can't go look at other stuff.
Mm.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you can't go part-time and go and volunteer and do something else. There is always a way. But if anybody is sitting about waiting for things to happen, well, unfortunately, you're going to die waiting.
Yeah, do you know, sometimes I find it really frustrating because I've always been quite driven and maybe a bit too driven, and to the point that I just end up burning out. But when you see other people who just won't make those changes, and you can clearly see they're in that place where they're just like, I know I want to change, but I won't do it. So, what do you do when you're in that situation and you see someone else going through that? Like Ali, for example, who's obviously giving you the push from time to time, but like, yeah. So, how do you deal with like being in the other shoe, essentially?
So if you're the person who's struggling to change, or you see somebody around you
You
struggling to
see
change,
someone else, yeah,
do
it's
you know?
tough.
Yeah, it is, because you can say all the most lovely, positive, uplifting, encouraging, beautiful things you possibly can, and they need to want to change. I guess it's like, I'm not a smoker, but I guess it's like smoking. You don't have to quit. You don't have to stop smoking. But if deep down you know it's the right thing for you to do, well then do it. If you know it'll give you a longer, healthier, happier life, why would you not do it? And
Mm.
it's the same with this. If you are in a job or a situation in life that you find is dull or mind numbing or making you unhappy, or just life is just monotonous, we have a choice.
Mm.
You can absolutely choose, but I can't make anybody do it. But what I can do is I can share my experiences. I can show them some cool wee bits of positive psychology and tricks and tips and techniques that they can do to shift the thinking and try different things. And hopefully, by the end of one of my workshops or from reading one of my books, they've got a wee something has just clicked where they go, right, I'm going to go give it a go. And it's funny because I got an email about a year ago from a woman in Australia saying that I had helped her to escape an 11-year abusive
Oh,
marriage.
geez.
Now, I didn't help her escape. I mean, but when you're writing a book or you're creating a presentation
Mm.
online, like I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, now this might help a woman in Australia to escape an abusive marriage. That's not what's in my head. I'm just writing what I think works and for me, and if it works for someone. So, there's all sorts of people out there stuck in all sorts of situations, not just careers, there's
Mm.
relationships and whatever else. Um, but again, I think it's important to caveat that, particularly her example, sometimes you really can't leave. Sometimes there's
Mm.
all sorts of reasons why it's so difficult. But there is always a way, and I think hope is really important.
Mm.
Um, it's too easy to say somebody, oh, be positive and put it in perspective. Sometimes that's the worst advice.
Yeah. Mm.
Sometimes it's the worst advice. And actually, I remember Ali sitting me down in 2018 and just saying, right, tell me everything that's wrong.
Hmm.
And she didn't try to force her thinking on me. I just needed somebody to listen.
Mm.
So again, find your person and say what you need to say, but there's always a way.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I have to keep my mouth shut sometimes, honestly. I just was like, people don't want advice all the time. So, yeah, I know what you mean. You just sometimes you just need someone to listen, isn't it?
You're right, but I also think some people don't want to change.
Mm.
I think deep down they love it. I mean, I did an event recently. Um, there was maybe only a couple hundred people in the room, and with it being a couple hundred, it means that after there's you can chat with people and get round quite a few
Mm.
people and things like that. And I met somebody who I've now met at 2 or 3 different events, and over the last few years, they've not changed a thing. They're utterly fed up, and do you know what? I think they love it. I think they absolutely love it, and they love being negative, and they love moaning, and they
Mm.
love complaining, and they love criticizing their boss. Honestly, it's not my way of doing things, and I think it's better if you keep that to yourself.
Yeah, you're right. Some people thrive on the drama,
They
isn't
love
it?
it, and
Totally.
they love to stand at the water cooler at work and have a wee bitch and a moan with their pal. They find their wee toxic twin
Yeah,
and
totally.
ruin it for everyone else.
Oh God, I know. Tell me about it. It's everywhere, isn't it?
It is.
But actually, there was such a cool video. I did actually go and look for it after you mentioned it in your book, which is the Balloon Monday instead of
Yeah,
Blue Monday, which I loved. So, could you just explain what you did, what the reaction was, and what do you think you learned from the interactions?
absolutely. It's the video I think I'm most proud of. So, of course, the inspiration came from Blue Monday, which is the third Monday of every January. Or is it second Monday? No, third Monday, I think, of every January. And of course, Blue Monday is believed by many to be the most unhappy and depressing day of the year. It is, of course, nonsense. It was invented by a marketing company on behalf of a high street travel agent to convince us all to book holidays, basically. However, what happened in the UK? We embraced it. Why? Because we love it.
Yeah.
Um, so we wanted to kind of fight back against Blue Monday, and we came up with Balloon Monday. So we stood. So this would have been the Blue Monday before COVID. Sorry, a year
Oh
before
wow.
COVID. Actually, it was actually the year before COVID. Now that I think about it, so what would that have been? 2019.
Yes.
Is that right? And we stood outside Waverley Station in Edinburgh, of course, one of the busiest train stations in Scotland. And we stood there between 7:30 and 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. Blue Monday, of course, as people are piling off the train. Everybody's heads are down, staring at their phones. Nobody looks happy. They're coming into work. Weekend's over, of course, start of a new week. And we stood at the top of the escalators and handed out beautiful, colourful helium balloons. There's a couple of moments where I go down the escalator and hand it to the people going up the escalator. But as people can see in the video, not all the reactions were positive. We were met by, let's call it a real varied mix of reactions. There was people who were over the moon, delighted. It put them, and you see them, huge
Yeah.
smiles on their face. You can tell it's just made their morning. Some went on a little bit of a journey with their balloon. However, we were also met with some very grumpy faces, some very angry people. Now it's not in the video, but I was told to f off by a few people.
What?
Um, I was told that what I was doing was ridiculous and to get out the way a few times and stop being ridiculous. But I would say, in the main part, people were absolutely blown away to receive a balloon. And what was really cool about it was later on in the day, and of course you don't see this in the video, but we started to receive emails from people. Now, because we were filming, once we had handed out a balloon to somebody, one of my colleagues had to chase after them and say,
Ah.
"Look, we actually filmed that. Are you okay with that? It's being used for this. It's not negative." And in fact, I think all people said, "Yeah, that's fine." But we had to give them our details. So later on that day, we were getting emails from people saying, "I arrived at work with a big pink helium balloon. And apparently it led to these beautiful discussions, which then
Oh,
led to two different companies. Then they all went out and bought balloons and went and handed them
oh
out
my
as
God.
well. And then there was another company who decided that lunchtime they were all going to go out and they all bought food for homeless people. And you just think,
Wow.
and that's just two or three examples, and you think, we don't know what else happened that day. And it was that kind of kindness ripple, I guess. And to know that those things then happened just blows my mind. Because really, we just wanted to put some smiles on some people's faces on a Monday morning and show that it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And I think there's a quote we use at the end from A.A. Milne, who, of course, wrote Winnie the Pooh, and that is, nobody can be uncheered by a balloon. And we
Yes.
proved it. You hand out balloons, it puts a great big smile on people's faces, it gives them a lift, and it makes their day. So, yeah, so for those that are listening, just type Balloon Monday into YouTube, and it's 2 minutes long. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. I immediately went and looked for it. And I was like, "Oh, that's so nice." And it is so strange, isn't it? The different interactions. I was just like, yeah, I was just so surprised because I was just like, I would just be so over the moon if someone handed me a balloon.
Yeah, and you see there's one guy in it who doesn't look happy at all, and he's basically going, "Aye, on your bike, son." But then later on in the video, he comes back, and he comes back for his balloon, and that felt for me that was like a personal win.
Yes.
On that day, I was like, "We got you. You couldn't stop thinking about a balloon." And he's like, "Oh, I kept thinking about it. And I thought I really should have taken one." And off he went with his balloon.
I love it. And exactly, it's a balloon, but it doesn't matter what age you are, it still is something that's very uplifting, both literally and figuratively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I really, so as I was sort of going through the book as well, I think you're right in terms of I like what's happened in Scotland, especially with the Nicola Sturgeon looking at GDP in a different way, which I think
Yeah.
is really fascinating. And so, how do we get all countries to sort of focus on well-being and not wealth?
Oh, if I had the answer to that, I mean, we'd be billionaires, and changing the world and giving it all back for good causes. Um, Unlike most billionaires,
Yeah.
I say that's maybe unfair. Some certainly, but well, this is something that really was inspired by countries like New Zealand, and places like Iceland, and so on, that were putting well-being ahead of money, basically, measuring success on health and wellness,
Mm,
as opposed to how much money you've got in the bank and so on. Um, and I think we're not going to be able to. This is not something you can flick a switch and it just happens. If you look at what's going on in the world now, um, from a okay, there's horrific things going on in the world
yeah.
right now, but from a monetary perspective, of economies are breaking, and are at breaking point again. Here we're
Yeah.
talking. People are talking about recessions again. I mean, I remember the last recession. I started my business the year of the recession, and I remember it was awful. Like, it was really difficult. But I remember people saying, "Oh, if you can make it work this year, then you'll be all right," kind of thing.
Mm,
But I think, post COVID, and now with Brexit and with the war in Ukraine and so on, if there was ever a time where we needed a bigger focus on well-being
mm,
and happiness and making a positive difference in the world and having a sense of togetherness and community and that sort of what we would call a benefit mindset, that sort of more outwardly looking take on things, a more global stance, well,
mm,
then it's right now.
yeah.
How do we do that? Where do you even start? Schools, I think, for a
Mm,
start, super important. I mean, the young people in this world are incredible. I mean, you look at
mm,
things like the sort of global environmental issues,
yeah.
climate change, and so on. You had Greta leading the way on that, but she's just one of millions around the world of young
Yeah.
people who genuinely care, genuinely care, not just about the planet, but the people on the planet and the animals, and will go out their way to make a difference and to
Mm,
help. and to bring a real positive spotlight to everything that's good in the world. And we kind of need it. We need
Yeah.
it right now. And with the work that I do, I mean, I can't reach billions. I can reach quite a lot of people sometimes, depending on how a book's doing or
Mm.
how many people are at an event. And I've got a wee team in my business now. There's 8 of us, and we've got a team that work in schools and colleges and
Mm.
unis. We've got a team that are in businesses, whether that's private, public sector, third sector. And there's only so much that we can do. But the vision for our business is to inspire the world. And I remember recently somebody saying to me, "Oh, that's a bit grand. Check you." And I'm going, "Well, hang on. What do you mean?" And they're like, "Oh, it's a bit ambitious." I'm going, "Yes, yes, it is ambitious. And the only way we're going to make the world a better place is to be ambitious and is to dare and to have the courage and the bravery and the belief that we can make a
Mm.
difference." Um, World leaders have got an awful lot to answer for. And unfortunately, the focus for so many of them is money and arms and power. There's the odd few here and there who are trying really, really hard to make it about something else. I don't think they're winning, but I think there are
Mm.
enough little breakthroughs for some of them that actually we can see that there is a better way. And if I
Yeah.
get to play my tiny little part in helping to shift the spotlight to things like well-being, I'll be that person all day long.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We need some, like, at least some people working on this. And thankfully, you, as you said, there are so many, young people making such a massive difference in so many sort of areas, like March for Our Lives, who have taken on gun control and things like that in the
Incredible.
US. It's such a hard thing to do, especially when they've been through it themselves and things like
This
that.
is it. This is it.
Um,
Unfortunately, some of the biggest powers that be are just old white men.
Sad, but true.
I don't think I need to say anything else. They're just who are fighting it out to make the most money, and it's not okay. And yeah, this world has a long way to go, and it's
Hmm.
not. Do you know? It sounds so doom and gloom. There are amazing things in this world. What we see at the moment is not particularly amazing, but this is where I think sometimes we have to switch the news off and put your phone down and get off of social media, because there are amazing people of all ages from all over the world with all sorts of beliefs who are doing the most wonderful things, making incredible differences on this planet. And if anybody out there is thinking about what their purpose is and they know that they want to help and make a difference, go find them. It's amazing when you
Mm.
go looking for the positives. It's like, like if you, it's that old thing. You go looking for the problems, you'll find them.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're everywhere. But if you go looking for the positives and the possibilities, you find them because they're everywhere. You might just need to try a wee bit harder sometimes to find them, but they are there. And
Mm.
I mentioned the phrase earlier. You need to find your people. Well, if climate is your thing, or
Mm.
happiness and well-being type festivals and things that are your thing, go find them, go
Yeah.
seek them out, and go be a part of it.
I wanted to ask you, because coming on to the last question, because this is actually kind of tied into your most recent book, which is, would you write a book for primary school children?
I have.
Ah.
So I co-wrote. So I have written a few other books with a friend of mine called Andy Cope. Now, Andy Cope is
Oh.
actually Dr. Andy Cope, who is the UK's first and only Doctor of Happiness. Like, officially, he is literally Doctor Happy or Doctor Feel Good. Don't know if he likes that one. But he, so our first book was also for adults, though. It was called Shine. Um, and then he introduced me to a friend of his, and the three of us then wrote a book called Zest, which was also for adults. This is a few years ago now. But then off the back of that, we wrote Diary of a Brilliant Kid,
Ah,
Top
yes.
Secret Guide to Awesomeness. And it was for sort of 7 to 11 year
Mm.
olds. What the publishing world refers to as, and I hate this word, tween-agers.
Ah.
What? Anyway, that's what they call it. And they had said to us, would you consider doing something for that? I'll use it again. Last time, age. And we were like, well, absolutely. Let's give it a go and see what happens. So the Brill Kid book, it went bonkers, and still to this day is going bonkers.
Mm.
It's our best-selling book.
Wow.
And actually, just maybe about 6 months ago, we released Brill Kid 2.
Yay.
So it came out. It's on Amazon. Um, and it's not a. You don't have to read the first one to read the
Mm.
second one. It's not a natural follow-on. They stand alone, but both fab with just the right amount of silliness. And it is very silly in places, but every moment of silliness has a lovely message wrapped inside it.
That's
So yes, and I would love to write more for that age group because actually, I think we need it.
yeah, exactly. Because I was like, getting them young, essentially.
Yeah, and well, I mean, at that age, they are so positive and so like creative, and their resilience is extraordinary at that age. I
Mm.
mean, I think that's one of the things. Like I write and talk quite a lot about my time as a primary school teacher and how I think I was more inspired working with wee kids under the age of 10 than
Mm.
I ever was working with adults. The way a young kid turns up on a Monday morning, raring to go and just get stuck in and give it everything, and then as an adult, you start going to work and people come in on a Monday going, "Oh, it's Monday. Oh, I hate Mondays." And you're like, "Oh my god, what
Yeah.
happened? Like, what actually happens?" So yeah, too many people grow up. Too many people turn into grown ups, and it's up to them how they spell the word grown as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Oh, I like that. That was really good. Yeah, and thank you so much for speaking with
Oh
me,
no,
Gavin,
thank
about
you.
your great book. I really, really enjoyed it and looking forward for other people to also read it. So, yes, huge thanks, Gavin.